Welcome to Chapter 2 of Fire and Emergency Services Instructor 9th Edition. Today we'll be discussing principles of learning. Objective 1 is going to be discuss the foundations of learning. Jumping right into it. Many educational psychologists have done extensive research on how humans learn and remember information. This section covers a few research areas that explain how instruction methods and techniques can affect or influence learning. We as instructors need to be aware that the field of education and learning is not static. The foundations of learning presented here are considered the classic learning theories. Sensory stimulus theory states that there is a lifelong reliance on the 5 senses as the primary tool set for learning. And as we can see on the slide, sensory stimulus theory discusses people only changing their behavior or knowledge based on engaging these 5 senses. The sense of sight takes in the most information, and it's dramatic. It's 75%, with hearing being next, and it's not close. It's a distant second. People learn very little through the remaining 3 senses. So knowing that, we are going to optimize the seeing and the hearing. And then we'll talk about doing a little later. Students may pay more attention to sensory experiences than to mental processes or emotional involvement. Foundations of learning continued. A sensory stimulus is either important enough to remember, so commonplace it is disregarded, or unimportant enough that it is forgotten. The mental storage system for attention-getting sensory stimulus or input, such as odors, sights, sounds, and sensations, is sensory memory. So remember that. That's a good test question. It is difficult to attend to more than one stimulus at a time and remember it well. In order to remember information, students must give an appropriate amount of attention time to the sensory stimuli they are receiving. They should do this before they can attend to another source of stimulation, which put simply means that we can't be overwhelming our students too much, because the more stimuli we have, the more distracting it is. So there's a happy medium there as we continue on. If we're overstimulating, they're going to get distracted. Obviously, there's understimulating also. We want to be right in that sweet spot. But you can see here on the 5 senses of learning percentages, seeing is 75% on those senses. Hearing is 13. When I said a distant second, that's a distant second. And then the other 3 senses are 12% combined. So seeing truly is believing, right? Seeing is believing. Foundations of learning, cone of learning. In the fire and emergency services, this sensory stimulus approach has evolved and become more accurately defined using the cone of learning. This cone illustrates the approximate amount of information retained. As a competent instructor, we must embrace the science of learning, and we're seeing it right here on slide 2-4. Just look at the cone of learning and what it tells us. Reading, hearing, and seeing alone, not much is retained. 10%, 20%, 30%. We're only retaining 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, and 30% of what we see. in regards to the cone of learning. 50% of what is seen and heard together, all of those are considered passive participation, because essentially you could sit there on your own and read or listen. Now we get into active participation next. 70% of what is said and repeated can be retained. 90% of what is said and done at the same time can be retained. So obviously, we want to live in the active participation zone as much as we can, because we're seeing dramatic increases in the opportunity to retain information. 70% saying and repeating, 90% saying and performing. Dr. Malcolm Knowles was among the first American theorists to use the term andragogy. Don't say that name great, but andragogy, which refers to the art of teaching adults. It describes the characteristics of adult students and provides a set of assumptions for most effectively teaching adults. This theory is now widely accepted in adult education. And you can see we have 5 areas. The first is self-concept. Adults need to be self-directed while they're still relying on an instructor or a training course to provide the knowledge they desire. The next one is experience. Adults have accumulated extensive and varied quantities of experiences that serve as a resource for them and to which they can relate new information. They also have more personal experiences to contribute to the learning process than children do. The next one is readiness to learn. Adults are ready to learn whatever they need to know or do in order to meet job requirements or social roles. The fourth one is learning orientation. Adults' learning orientation is problem-centered because they have specific purposes for learning and want skills or knowledge that can be applied to real-life problems or situations. And the fifth and final is motivation. Adults have internal incentives or motivators. They are motivated to learn by such factors as increased self-esteem resulting from the successful completion of the learning process and the desire to attain a goal. Dr. Malcolm Knowles' assumptions play a bedrock role in adult learning. I strongly urge you to know this very well, because this is also an area that they like to test. This chapter is an area that they really like to test on. Thorndike's laws of learning. The laws of learning, as theorized by Professor Edward L. Thorndike, suggest that there are certain laws or traits of adult learners that can be used to effectively instruct adult students. Instructors need to understand that these laws to lead adult education. The laws of adult learning are, first, readiness. Adult students must be prepared to learn and must place themselves in a state where they are mentally and physically able to learn new knowledge or skills. In the fire and emergency services, adult students recognize that the information they will receive is necessary and important to their success and safety. Of course, there may be barriers to readiness, such as attending a class after an all-night 24-hour shift. However, adult students still have to recognize the importance of learning. The second one is exercise. Adult learners are best when they are allowed to exercise skills. The more an act is practiced, the faster and surer the learning becomes. Fire and emergency services instructors should, therefore, include as much time as possible for adult learners to practice concepts and skills. The amount of exercise required will vary among students. The third one is effect. Adult learners need to see the positive effect of what they are learning. This effect could be the satisfaction of learning a new skill or mastering new information. A good instructor continually reinforces why adult learners need to master the information or skills presented. And the last one, disuse. Among adult learners, it can be assumed that habits and memories used repeatedly are strengthened, and habits not reinforced, of course, are weakened. One way that instructors address the disuse of previous training topics is by reviewing necessary precursor information at the beginning of a lesson. The effects of disuse form the foundation of the argument for continued training and education. Follow-up practice at the company level reinforces skills learned during instruction. Association. Adult learners tend to try to associate new information with information they already have learned. Creating association during instruction is very simple, such as expanding on prerequisite knowledge and adding another layer of information. Sometimes information is entirely new to students. Instructors should still attempt to find associations for the information, even though the connection to what students already know may take more advanced thought to discover. Recency. Skills and information practiced or learned most recently are also the best remembered. For example, adult learners may not remember the information on a certification test years after it if they do not use the information in the intervening years. Instructors need to recognize when skills or information have fallen into disuse so that they know when it is appropriate to review information that adult learners already know. Instructors need to include enough time to summarize the day's lesson in order for the information to be most recent in the students' minds when they leave. Primacy. Primacy is similar to recency. Primacy assumes that the first of a series of learned acts is remembered better than others. With this effect in mind, instructors should begin each lesson with a strong overview of content, including the session's learning objectives, major concepts, and the way the lesson will connect to overall training. Intensity. If a stimulus is vivid and real, it will be more likely change or have an effect on the behavior. For example, an instructor who involves students in a rescue demonstration and then demonstrates how to use a certain tool or extrication technique provides an experience more likely to be remembered than a lecture or video recording on how to perform the skill. Okay, let's talk certification versus competence. You're going to hear that a lot is, am I getting certified or am I getting a certificate of competence out of this class? Certified or certification. A certified student possesses proof that they completed coursework and passed a written and/or practical exam. Competence means that the individual has practiced and maintained mastery of a skill or knowledge. This class is a certification class. At the end of it, if you complete the coursework, pass the written exam and the practical exam, you will be certified as a Fire and Emergency Services Instructor Level 1. Now, let's say that we didn't have a class that we could certify to, but we were still doing instructor work, but we were training to a standard. Then there's no written or practical exam, but what we're doing is we're practicing and we're training to a standard. Then you would get a certificate of competence, meaning that you've been doing practiced work in this area but there's no certifying agent to the course. That happens a lot. The state of Washington only has so many certifications. For example, rope and technical rescue. There used to be a certification to it. Now there no longer is. So now it's certificates of competency to rescue technician level 1 and 2 because there's no certifying agency. Okay, hope that's clear as mud. Okay, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This presents a 5-stage hierarchy to explain human motivation. Psychologist Abraham Maslow published the concept in 1943 in an academic paper titled A Theory of Human Motivation. The 5 basic levels of Maslow identified are: level 1 is physiological or biological. This is the need for air, water, food, shelter, warmth, sleep, etc. Until a person is reasonably satisfied with these needs, the focus will always be on satisfying these and you will not progress. But if we do satisfy level 1, we move to level 2, which is safety. This is the need for security, order, stability, law, and freedom from fear. Level 3 is social. This is the need to belong to a societal group, be accepted, be loved, and valued by others. Level 4 is esteem, the need to achieve and master, need for self-respect, prestige, respect of others, status, and dominance. And the last level is level 5, self-actualization, is the need to seek self-fulfillment, personal growth, or culminating experiences. Dr. Maslow believed that all people are capable of reaching the higher levels, but life circumstances or other considerations may disrupt that progress. In a training environment, this theory explains why a student may not perform well in a classroom setting when he or she is unable to meet the lowest level requirements. Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a college level class is studied extensively because it has been proven to match and be a very good representation on how we as humans progress in our lives. When we're able to take care of the physiological level, which is establish a basic level of life that we're living, when that is satisfied, we move on to the next level. But if I can't satisfy levels, it is proven that I do not advance, I do not mature, I do not grow. So folks that are economically depressed, that can't get out of that physiological, biological area, it's proven that they don't get into that social, that esteem, that self-actualization because they can't satisfy the basic needs that they need. They can't even get to safety. What we can do as fire and emergency services instructors is we can know these levels, recognize when we have some students that are struggling and start to hypothesize why. And then, like the physiological, let's say we're dealing with the safety. We can make sure our students feel safe and they know they're here to learn and they're in a safe place, which will then bump them in that class and that class alone up to the social. Hopefully we get to the esteem and we have a very confident student. Objective 2, differentiate among the domains of learning. Domains of learning refer to interrelated areas in which learning occurs. When the domains are used together, a student is encouraged to understand a concept, perform a task, and or alter a behavior. The 3 learning domains are cognitive, which is knowledge. This is the domain that encompasses the what information a student should learn. Psychomotor, which are skills. This is the domain that encompasses the how a student should apply knowledge. The third one is affective or attitude. That domain encompasses the why the information is useful. Cognitive, psychomotor, and affective, the what, how, and why. As we continue on in the domain of learning, having an understanding of these domains and how they interact will assist us as instructors in presenting effective instruction. Through the cognitive domain, students gain understanding about a concept or topic. Through the psychomotor domain, students perform the skills associated with that concept or topic. Through the affective domain, students develop a willingness to perform the behavior correctly and safely. The cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains are the what, how, and why of the learning process. A deeper dive into cognitive. You can see here on the slide that cognition is a general concept that refers to all forms of knowing, including perceiving, imagining, reasoning, and judging. It is the foundation for the other two domains. Without cognitive, the process does not happen. Cognitive information is usually presented in a technical or factual presentation, usually in lecture and or discussion form. Instructors, we have to use the following resources and techniques to describe and illustrate cognitive material to make it interesting and dynamic. We need to use instructional technologies and tools and training aids effectively. We need to show models and other displays effectively. We need to perform demonstrations to our students and involve the students in application activities. Psychomotor or skills. The psychomotor domain is typically referred to as the hands-on training. Knowledge gained in the cognitive domain is transferred to physical movement. Learning is developed through the repeated practice of the skill. I always use the example of a football team. We have to learn the playbook. That's cognitive. Now we go out and we practice it on the field. That's psychomotor. And we're going to keep doing it over and over and over until we reach a level of mastery. Successful completion of the skill is measured in speed, precision, distance, adherence to known techniques, and sequence of execution. Just like a task sheet in Firefighter 1, it lays out all the steps, and our testees, our students, need to be able to do that in a certain order, at a certain pace, and that is why we practice those skills so that they can do that when it comes time for certification testing. Through positive reinforcement and continued practice, our students will develop the correct techniques and become proficient so that the skills become a habit that is performed automatically. When you hear muscle memory, doctors, surgeons, firefighters, police officers that do these skills over and over again and it becomes second nature, that is what we're talking about. And if we can create an environment where they're getting the positive reinforcement, that will accelerate the process. Because when we learn in fear, the learning is stunted significantly because we're more concerned as students of not getting in trouble while we learn. Positive feedback and positive reinforcement are critical in accelerating the learning process. And you can see with practice and experience, students modify actions to fit other situations as needed. We as instructors have to be aware that students learn at different rates of speed and levels of ability. I myself, as a student, learn slower than other students learn. I'm the person that once I get it, I've got it, but I'm probably not the first one done or the first one done practicing because I need to really burn it into my brain. So understand that. Everybody has their own style and process on how they learn, and we need to be prepared because we're going to have some folks on a written test or a psychomotor skill that are done very, very fast. Others take longer, but both of them score very, very well. It's just our different processes. Students have to be comfortable in one psychomotor level before advancing to the next. The best way I explain this is the crawl, walk, run method. Is, hey, we're working on crawling right now, hoping to walk. We're walking now, getting ready to run, meaning our proficiency is advancing. Some of our students may want to observe longer than others before they begin to practice, especially when it's new. You are going to have a lot of emergency worker students that want to watch because inherently as humans, we don't want to look silly. And when we don't know what to do, we have no confidence. So allow folks to observe, but also set that atmosphere that it is safe here to make a mistake and learn, and you're not going to be ridiculed. Others may want more guidance and coaching before feeling confident to work on their own. Both of those two bullets live in the same realm. It's all about confidence and setting a good atmosphere. Instructors must watch for and understand student abilities at each level and provide appropriate time and opportunity for learning. Build into your classes lots of time for practice. That's where firefighters and emergency workers learn the most, is hands-on practice. Studies of vocational training have indicated that most students will master each level if they're provided enough time, and that is fact. Okay, let's go on to affective or attitude. Our individuals, or we as individuals, deal with issues emotionally. We can deal with them in individual awareness. We can deal with them with our attitude, positive or negative, or neutral. Our interests will lead us through these in emotional. If I really want to be a rope rescue technician, that interest is going to affect my attitude, appreciation, what are our motivations, and enthusiasm and values. Because remember, now we're in the why. Why do I have to pull this 1 3/4 attack line off of this engine? And this is where my attitude is born, created, and moving forward out of these, 3, 6, 7 things. Instructors influence students' perception of the merits of the class, the institution, and or the environment when they demonstrate attitudes towards the authority, respect, responsibility, and safety, among other values. When an instructor's attitude is positive, the students will place higher value on these qualities and resources. On the other hand, negative attitudes can result in students having a low regard for these values. Those negative attitudes can be born at the instructor level. They can be born in the social group of the class. And they can be born with the student themselves, singular. Learning outcomes of the affective domain take time to achieve and are not as readily observable as the results of the cognitive and psychomotor domains. While learning new cognitive information and performing new psychomotor skills, students may alter old attitudes, values, and beliefs. Okay, quick review question, and the reason why I kept this here this is going to be on your test. What are the 3 domains of learning? Cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. The what, how, and why. Okay, on to objective 3. Let's explain student diversity and how it affects instruction in the learning environment. Student diversity is one factor that will contribute to a learning environment. Let's talk about some examples. Life experiences and responsibilities. If you've got a room full of, let's say, firefighters, some folks hold the rank of chief, and some folks are in their first year of service as a firefighter. That is some significant diversity. So when we talk about diversity, it isn't in the traditional way that we're all thinking, the 2026 diversity. It's diversity on all levels. It can be diversity in motivation, diversity in time demands and responsibilities. The rookie has all the time in the world. Fire Chief Volk is like, I have other things to do, and I don't have time to sit in this class. That could create a negative situation, but it's diversity. Confidence. It's going to be brutally obvious, the folks that on day one who have that confidence, normally through experience, and the ones that are new that do not. And then learner characteristics and differences. Meaning, how does Clint learn? And then, am I a gifted learner, or am I a person that is struggling to learn? More on student diversity. Instructors have a challenge in meeting student needs and assisting diverse groups to find the most effective learning method. When an instructor can tailor a lesson plan to his or her students, the students will be more engaged. Got a room full of chiefs. And it's like, well, you're not going to tailor that as if they were all rookies and vice versa. Or a room full of law enforcement, public works, and a little bit of fire and EMS. We need to tailor that to a diverse group that most surely does not have any idea what the other 2 groups or 3 groups do. Those are the challenges that need us to tailor that lesson plan because we have a lot of diversity. Characteristics of adult learners include, and we've talked a little bit about this already, life experiences and responsibilities through work, leisure, and family responsibilities. Motivation from student, internal, what gets Clint ramped up, what gets Clint motivated to learn, or from employer, supervisor, or the social group, external. Self-confidence in their ability to learn. Once again, you have seasoned students. They're probably going to be very confident because they are well established in their careers and their learning journey. Our newer folks potentially are not. You would be surprised how many people do not know how to study. Especially a lot of times when the school system may have just moved them along. It reinforced, hey, I really don't need a formal style of learning because I seem to be doing just fine. They're moving me along. When they don't have much confidence at all in their ability to learn. Adult learners do have differences. We can have differences in ages, gender, cultural and ethnic origins, educational backgrounds, physical capabilities, and obviously the last one is the type of folks that are coming with things that have nothing to do with why we're here. So know that in diversity, we're a melting pot of all of this, and you're prepared to integrate everyone equally into your courses. Our students should be respected for their abilities, experiences, individuality, and willingness to learn and perform. Increased student diversity brings a diversity of thought to the instructional environment, which in turn enhances learning. Okay, we got a note here. Generalities based upon aspects of diversity may be inaccurate. Instructors are cautioned to avoid broad generalizations based upon any one aspect of diversity. Okay, so any aspect of diversity, let's not get into generalities and paint with a very broad brush. Okay, little deep dive here. Age. Adults of different generations may have different experiences and skill sets that they bring to the learning environment. Instructors should take these differences into account and ask students with a particular strength to assist students who have less experience, to mentor them. That's a great use of that seasoned student that you may have in your class. Gender. Differing genders bring their own unique experiences to the classroom and training grounds. This is not 1985 anymore. Our gender biases and gaps are over with. So we are a very diverse service, the fire service, emergency services with our gender. Students may bring gender biases to the learning environment, which may affect their relationship with the instructor, other students' perceptions of the instructor, and the learning process. Allowing gender biases to enter a learning environment is disruptive to effective instruction. These differences may lead to class discussion, but should not derail the entire topic of the class. Also, the hosting agency standard operating procedures play here. So if we have people breaking policy and their biases are hurting the class, we need to take a break, speak to them privately, and let them know that agency policy mandates this, that they are close or breaking policy, and that if it continues, there may be repercussions outlined in that policy. Once again, another note for the purposes of this discussion. The term gender has been used to refer to the difference between men and women. Okay, cultural and ethnic backgrounds. Individuals from different culture and ethnic backgrounds bring unique customs, behaviors, attitudes, and values to the learning environment. We as instructors need to recognize and understand situations in which ethnic and cultural differences may have an effect on classroom instruction or student interaction. And you can see some of these, the big four. I want you to know these because these are great test questions. Customs, behaviors, attitudes, values. Learning styles and learner characteristics. Huge piece we talked about on the introduction slide. A learning style is the consistent way a person gathers and processes information. Students in the learning environment use sight, 75%, right? Hearing, 13%, and touch to gather information. Students will favor one or a combination of these senses individually. Students may not be aware that they use any particular style to participate in learning, nor that they may use different learning styles for different tasks or circumstances. Our students develop their individual learning styles based upon their personal learner characteristics, which are comprised of academic, social, emotional, and cognitive skills. Learner characteristics determine the student's learning style that is born out of academic, social, emotional, and cognitive skills. Instructors can recognize different learning styles in the way individual students, 1, perceive, remember, and think about information and solve problems. 2, see and make sense of their world and attend to their environment. And finally, attend to instruction and participate in activities. These differences are all representative of differing learning styles based on which sense or combination of senses provides students with the most accurate amount of information that is acceptable to them. To meet different learning styles, we as instructors need to plan variety of teaching methods, learning activities in our lessons. In some situations, our students will have developed learning styles that are not productive and can even contribute to their own failure. They are often not aware that their studying and learning habits are not working. It's because that's all they know. Through the use of a variety of teaching strategies, an instructor can guide students into developing more effective learning styles. If you see that a student is not doing well and it is obvious to you that they do not have good studying and learning habits, you set a time where you can speak to them one-on-one individually, just like a school teacher, and talk through it. Identify the concern or problem, and then present solutions. And then try to come up with a plan together to move forward. Some students will indicate a preference to regulate their learning environment to take advantage of their skills, focus, and direction. When an instructor is able to accommodate this self-regulation, a student can set his or her own goals, learn content, and provide feedback to the instructor independent of the rest of the class. The instructor should be aware that the self-regulated learner is likely working toward a goal for personal satisfaction. To that end, the self-regulated learner may ask more probing, explorative questions and seek additional information beyond the other students. These are motivated learners. These are learners that do all the reading, all the homework, and they're on top of their game. This may at times present a challenge for the instructor and the rest of the class, since the self-regulated student may require additional attention, time, and resources compared with the traditional student. The instructor is encouraged to support the self-regulated learning activity, but must balance this with the needs of the entire class. Learning objective 4, we're going to summarize interpersonal communication purposes, elements, and components. Interpersonal communication takes place between individuals every day and can reveal both the similarities and polar differences in the way people interact and disperse information. Some characteristics of interpersonal communication include informal language, informal nonverbal clues, frequent changes of the speaker and listener role, spontaneity, formality, command versus discussion. Am I saying it to you and that's it, or are we having a discussion that's back and forth? Intensity, our pitch, tone, and volume. The following list describes the 5 general purposes of interpersonal communication. The first one is learning. We're acquiring knowledge or skills. The second one is relating. We're establishing a new relationship or maintaining an existing one. Third is influencing. Control, direct, or manipulate the behavior. We're influencing. The next one, the fourth, is playing. Create a diversion and gain pleasure or gratification, as with positive humor. We're talking about a lesson plan and a harmless opportunity at humor, and everybody enjoys it, and we're enhancing the experience. Helping is attending to another person's needs or console someone in a time of tragedy or loss. These are in the 5 major elements of interpersonal communication. In addition to understanding the purposes for these interactions, the instructor must also understand the following 5 basic elements of interpersonal communication during a lecture. The sender, commonly the instructor, is sending verbal and nonverbal communication. The message is the lesson. This is the content that the sender is trying to communicate. The message may consist of information intended for multiple human senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch. The receiver, which is our student, is the individual or individuals to whom the sender is attempting to communicate with. Feedback to the sender, also known as the instructor. Reaction of the receiver to the message and its tone. If this feedback is verbal, the receiver becomes the sender and relates a new message to the original sender, who then becomes the receiver. Receiving feedback allows the original sender to confirm reception of the message and to assess the receiver's level of understanding. That's why we ask questions during class. Interference, anything that may prevent the receiver from completely understanding the message. This can include information overload, when a student tries to absorb too much information at a time. It can include distraction. It can include poor presentation or conflicting material. All of that is a good example of interference. In a classroom model of instruction, it is the instructor's responsibility to interpret and encode the information in a lesson plan so that the students will understand it. All communication takes place within a larger frame of reference. Senders, right now, the instructors, we encode, meaning we're putting information together and sending it, saying it to our students. Our students are the receivers. They're hearing what Clint says, and they have to decode it, meaning I understand what you're saying. As we know, communication is hard. So there are times that Clint thinks, man, I'm a master communicator. And my students are like, what is he saying? I'm confused. So I've encoded, but my receivers, my students, have not decoded. And most surely, it's my fault as the instructor. We as instructors must learn to encode information at the student's level and not attempt to include more information than necessary. As the receivers of information, our students will attempt to decode their instructor's message. After decoding the message, students will relate it to what they already know and determine what its meaning is for them. Continuing on interpersonal communication. Students respond to an instructor through feedback. Feedback can be verbal, such as a student asking a question, or nonverbal, as when the student appears bored or unmotivated, or they're giving you that look like, I do not understand what you are saying. When instructors pay attention to student feedback, they can modify the lesson to better serve our students. The delivery or reception of a message may be distorted or blocked through interference. Types of interference include an instructor not recognizing or misinterpreting a student's feedback cues, a student not listening to an instructor, or inappropriate use of electronic devices, right? Cell phones have changed the game in a classroom because everybody's got one, they're bored, and they're on it. For communication to be effective, both the sender and receiver must agree on its purpose. A shared situation usually creates this agreement. In some cases, the purpose must be explicitly stated to ensure that both parties understand it fully. No cell phone use during class time. Period. That is how to explicitly state something if it is a distraction. Verbal component. Instructors must understand both the power and weakness of words as part of the message. The words in a message typically account for only a very small percent of the overall total information communicated. However, the words in a message carry most of the abstract meaning in communication. For an instructor to communicate effectively, he or she must have some idea of the student's familiarity with the technical aspects of the class content. When a subject is completely new to most students in a class, the instructor should limit any industry-specific and technical terms and abbreviations. We need to avoid any technical language and fire service jargon when speaking with the public, elected officials, media, and others from outside the profession. Let's avoid language that might be considered offensive, gender biased, racist, or otherwise stereotyped. By practicing the following guidelines, instructors can hone their verbal communication skills. Let's engage in dual perspective. I'm trying to see it from your point of view, my point of view. Let's take responsibility for personal feelings and thoughts. Let's show respect for the feelings and thoughts of other people. Try to gain accuracy and clarity in speaking. Be aware of any special needs of the receiver, also known as the student. And avoid speaking or addressing a problem while angry or otherwise experiencing strong emotions. Nonverbal component. Body language. Vocal tone and volume and personal appearance. You can see 7% is translated through words. 55% is attributed to Clint's body language. And then 38% is my vocal tone and inflection. So if I've got a negative attitude and my body language is showing it, it's going to turn everybody off. If I'm upbeat and excited and I'm energetic, that tends to have more of a positive effect to the classroom setting. Vocal tone and inflection. If Clint is being monotone and things go continually like this, it's not going to keep everybody kind of on their toes. Okay, continuing on nonverbal components. Nonverbal communication can project a person's self-perception, emotional state, approachability, or cultural background. Brief descriptions of nonverbal communication recommendations are as followed. Vocal characteristics. Practice speaking slowly, which I always struggle with, using variation in pitch to provide emphasis, use volume appropriate to the situation, and proper diction to ensure that words are clearly understood. Vocal interferences. Eliminate filler words and empty phrases. Instructors with a regional or cultural accent may also need to closely monitor their speech to make sure their audience can understand them. Eye contact. Maintain eye contact while speaking and modify the amount or duration of eye contact when appropriate. In Eurocentric cultures, good eye contact can convey self-confidence, honesty, trust, and credibility. Averting one's gaze can indicate deceit, dishonesty, insecurity, or anxiety. However, eye contact is also a function of cultural background, so it must be appropriate to the situation, the relationship, and the culture. Facial expression. Match your facial expressions to the message. The face can show the basic emotions: happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, anger, and disgust. To effectively communicate the correct message in a relationship, the facial expression needs to match the verbal message. Gestures. Learn to use gestures to emphasize and illustrate the message. In situations where noise prevents verbal communication, gestures can be effective for sending messages such as "come here" and "stop." Identify and control gestures that are annoying or distracting to others. More nonverbal components. Our personal appearance. Are we adequately dressed for the professional setting? If not, if I'm there in sweatpants and an untucked shirt with holes in it, non-verbally, I'm letting everybody know this is not very important to me. My posture. Have good posture, standing up straight, not slouched, proud, in command of my self and content. Poise plays right into that. Proximity and touch. All are nonverbal components. Learning objective 5. We're going to identify the aspects of the listening process. This is huge because like Clint struggles with listening. He's excited to talk. I need to focus on my listening, so that's what we're going to do here in learning objective 5. As a listening skill, attending focuses on the speaker while ignoring any other distractions. Instructors should ensure that the environment provides as few distractions as possible. Some suggestions for improving the attending step are as follows. Look at the speaker when possible. Think about what's being said. Visualize the situation or event that the speaker is talking about. Wait until the speaker is finished delivering the message before responding. Notice both the verbal and nonverbal messages. The next is understanding. Let's decode the message and assign meaning to it. This involves the following actions. We need to organize the message into a logical pattern. Interpret the nonverbal clues. Ask questions to clarify the meaning. The next is remembering. Retaining the information by taking notes, repeating lesson material back to an instructor, using mnemonic devices, and asking questions about unclear information. The fourth one is evaluating. Critically analyze information to determine how accurate it is or to separate fact from Clint's opinion. To effectively evaluate a message, listeners must draw on their own personal experience, assess the credibility of the speaker, and interpret nonverbal cues. And the last one is responding. Indicate to the sender that the message or information has been understood or requires more explanation. Responses may be verbal, such as asking questions or requesting more information, or nonverbal, such as nodding to indicate that the information was received. what ways can we practice active listening? We can listen to recordings of speeches or stories and really focus on listening to the content. We can practice taking notes at meetings and in classes. We can attend speeches or presentations and minimize internal and external distractions. Learning objective 6. Describe the learning obstacles and learning plateaus. Factors that affect learning obstacles. Students who struggle to learn new material may become frustrated. Not may, they will become frustrated, which further distracts them from the learning process. We as instructors have to realize that some students may experience additional stressors or situations that can undermine our students' success. Once instructors discover the underlying cause, they may be able to help students resolve some of these frustrations. Some students need assistance from the instructor to overcome learning obstacles or learning plateaus. Generally, obstacles to learning consist of external pressures and concerns that make the ability to focus on learning difficult and frustrating. Our students can fear not knowing how to study appropriately, talked about that a little bit earlier, ridicule by the instructor or classmates, that has all to do with that social status, right? Failure if they cannot perform as expected, leaving personal matters unresolved while spending long hours in a classroom setting. They have something going on in their personal life that is taking away from their focus in the classroom setting. The learning environment can present obstacles for students as well. Ways a learning environment can have a negative effect on learning. Long stretches of time without a break to either sit or stand. Our classes will move along much faster for us, because we're the ones talking and moving, than for our students who are sitting there staring at us. So set timers and things like that to make sure that everybody gets a chance to take a break and stretch their legs. Poor lighting and ventilation. Poorly organized training grounds or dangerous conditions. All are learning obstacles. Instructors should plan class intervals to allow opportunities to practice new skills, interact with training aids, and provide a variety in teaching methods. Absolutely critical, and we've talked about it already in the previous slides. Lots of time to practice. If we've got teaching aids, time for the students to interact with them, use them in practice, and providing variety in teaching methods. Like you're having to sit through right now, an entire class just with lecture can be pretty tough. But like I said earlier, lecture unfortunately gets the most use because it's the easiest way to give as much information as quickly as possible. So do what you can to break that up a little bit. A learning plateau can be compared to the landing on a flight of stairs. It is a break in upward progress. Some students stay there briefly, while others may have a difficult time moving past that point. Students sometimes create their own learning plateaus from emotional responses such as boredom or fear of failure. And here's an example of our learning plateaus in picture form. These emotions may occupy their minds and interfere with their concentration and progress. After students master the procedural steps of a skill, they need to practice until they meet a desired skill level. Once they reach this level, they will be exposed to more information and skills and expected to progress to the next level. We talked earlier, crawl, walk, run. Individuals may become discouraged, find it more difficult to reach a particular skill level, and most likely feel like quitting. Students must be coached and receive positive feedback as they practice. Even if we're giving bad news, we're doing it in a positive way. Like, hey, I really like what I see from you up to this step, and I see some things that we can work on here to improve your performance. There's positives in that. We as instructors should let our students know that these learning plateaus are normal. We need to help them recognize the signs of frustration, work with them to overcome those problems, review their methods of instruction to ensure they are able to communicate and demonstrate effectively. Okay, learning objective 7. We're going to discuss motivation as it relates to student success. Motivation. How instructors can help motivate students. If we're not good at motivating our students, we really got to take a look at everything we're doing as instructors. We need to provide relevance. We need to set realistic and obtainable goals. And we need to demonstrate enthusiasm. Expect success and require outstanding performance. Now, it isn't that it's going to be given in a negative way, but we're setting expectations in a motivating fashion. We're going to incorporate motivators. We're going to generate interest and participation, and we're going to do everything we can to include instructional variety if the platform allows. End of lecture. Okay, chapter 2. Once again, appreciate your hard work. Stay in your Resource 1 account. And you can see here, if you need anything from me, there's my cell phone number or my email. You reach out and I will get you all the support that you need, answer any of your questions that you may have. Appreciate your time and focus, and I will see you on the next chapter. Bye-bye.